Welcome to the Downright Capable Talk Show, changing the way others view Down syndrome. My name is Marla Marasco, and I am with my co-host, Brian Herndon.
Hello, everybody.
And I just wanted to remind everybody that if you are watching this on the replay, please feel free to share the show with others. If there's information in the show that we're talking about today that you might feel is useful for others, please share it. And you can also comment and ask questions because we do go back afterwards and we try to address your questions. So I'm very excited about our show today. We have a wonderful guest with us. And Brian, can you please introduce our guest to everyone?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm excited for today's show as well. We have Charmaine Thaner on the show today. Charmaine helps parents understand the special education process as well as inclusive education so that they can be even more effective as they speak up for their children. Charmaine's youngest son, Dylan, has Down syndrome and was fully included from preschool through college. And I know there's a world out there that's super jealous of that. She hosts a weekly live Facebook show as well on her page, Visions and Voices Together, has a membership group for parent trailblazers, and is a professional advocate. She also has a closed Facebook group, Universal Design for Inclusion, which we are excited to talk more about today. So welcome, Charmaine.
Thank you. It's fun to be with you guys, even if it's virtually.
Yes,
welcome.
Absolutely.
So excited to have you here today.
Absolutely. Well, we're glad you're here.
So Charmaine, I know Brian talked a little bit about your journey, but can you just maybe go in a little bit more about your journey into the advocacy world and then how that was able to support other parents along their journey?
Sure. Well, I think back to that first IEP meeting I went to, when your butterflies are flying around in your stomach and your mouth is dry and you're really feeling anxious, and you sit down at the table and the first thing you hear are all the things that the student can't do, right? And I remember being in my first IEP meeting and thinking, this is not the little person that I know. I know she is capable of so much more. And then we get to the point where, the director is saying, well, we need to get on and we need to start writing the goals. And all eyes look at me. I suggest some goals, which I think are, maybe a stretch, but could still be accomplished. Mm-hmm. And the director just kind of looks at me and it's like, no, we need to be realistic. What you are thinking about are unrealistic goals. And
interesting.
Towards the end of the meeting, I asked the special ed director, what do I do when I disagree with the IEP team, and what goals they want? And the director just looked at me like, you don't want to go there. Mm-hmm. And I was like, no, I really do.
Yeah, no idea.
Well, that was my first IEP meeting when I was a 20-year-old something special ed teacher.
Yeah.
And as a special ed teacher, I knew I had to be an advocate for my students. Absolutely. So that really was the start of my advocacy journey. I wouldn't know that, I don't know, what was it, maybe 16 years later, my husband and I would be sitting at an IEP table only on the other side.
Right.
Isn't that an interesting place to be?
Yes. And, here, both of us were special ed teachers. So we're like real familiar with the process and what the law says. But still, that emotional impact when you're talking about your own child is huge, right?
Yes.
And so throughout my 30 years of teaching, I always was an advocate for my kids. Afterwards, when I retired, I worked for Peak Parent Center, and I was able to, advocate for a lot of families there. And then I started my own advocacy business because I know how hard it is to be able to speak effectively for your child. And I knew the school system, and I kind of saw myself as being this bridge between what the school system is like and what I know parents need to do. And start developing those relationships. So
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because
followed your heart, I guess.
I love that. And I've also been an educator and a principal, so I've served as LEA at those meetings as well. But it is just a different feel when you're sitting in the parent seat.
Yes,
It just is. You know, and it, I don't know if you felt this, Charmaine, but it feels a little intimidating sometimes. You know,
absolutely.
even though you've led the meetings or you've been, in those meetings over and over, when you're in that parent seat, it just feels different.
Right.
It does. So tell us some of the challenges, obviously, as an educator, as a parent, there's going to be that delicate balance of navigating, advocating for your child, but yet still being employed. But what challenges have you found along the way advocating for your own son and now advocating for those for and with other parents? What advice might you give to those who are advocating for their children?
Right. Well, when Dylan was 3, we went to his first meeting with the belief that he could be fully included in
Mm-hmm.
school when he was a kindergartner and up. And it was like, well, we should be thinking about inclusion for preschool.
Right.
And so we had many meetings because our values and our idea of being fully included for preschool were different than the school districts.
Mm-hmm.
And so right away we kind of got into some conflict, and it was interesting because I was a teacher in the same district where my kids go to school.
Mm-hmm.
But luckily we filed for due process. We were able to settle at mediation. So kind of right out the door, we learned all about dispute resolution processes.
Wow.
Um,
Early age.
and I think actually that was helpful because we set the tone and the message right when Dylan was 3.
Mm-hmm.
Fully included means, you're going to be in a classroom 100% of the time.
Right.
You're going to be in a classroom where there's only a few kids maybe on IEPs.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I think that was the message that we set right away with the district.
I love it.
But, it is a challenge for parents. And I think I always go back to my values, and that's
Mm-hmm.
really important for me as far as how I'm going to make decisions on when I'm advocating.
Absolutely.
And just letting parents know that they have so much information. They have all these nuances that they know about their child, that is like gold nuggets, right? I mean,
It
that's
is. Absolutely.
more worthy than the scores on a Wyatt test or something.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so trying to help parents figure out, how do I pull out what I know? Because it's not like you can easily make a list as a parent of these are the things my kid does, this is his learning style, this is whatever.
Right.
But so to help parents know, this is a way that we can help you identify all that really valuable information to share with the team.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love
Yeah,
that.
someone
And I
just
love that you
commented.
said,
Go ahead, Brian.
go ahead, Marla.
I just wanted to share that, someone just commented that, she thinks that's why her daughter's inclusion was so much easier than for others, is that they started private, fully included preschool. Like, so they jumped on the bandwagon early, getting that mindset that inclusion is what we want. So that's awesome. I don't know that I started that early, but, but that's great.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to see
Well,
that that's working for her.
and I love Charmaine that you talked about going back to your values and what you as a family valued and wanted for your child and basing everything off of that.
Yeah.
And I think Marla and I have kind of talked about that with creating kind of a vision for your child. And then at some point they kind of weigh into that, but early on, obviously the vision is mom and dad's vision,
Mm-hmm.
So I love that you talked about that because I think that is important, when you can say, well, let's go back. Does this get us to where we want to be? I think that's important. Awesome.
Yeah, so I know I'm going to switch gears a little bit because for those of you that do follow Charmaine, I was watching a video last night, which I thought was amazing. And I just really wanted to share this with all of you. And I know Charmaine is going to be sharing this template that she talks about in her video, but it's an IEP goal template, and it's used to help measure the IEP goal, to see actually if the goal is measurable, I should say.
Mhm.
And the point of it is to help parents determine if that, again, that IEP goal is measurable. So when you have parents who look at their IEP, their child's IEP goal, and there's almost like 3 different things in one sentence. When I was looking at her video, this IEP goal template that she speaks of, there's just really no way that goal can be measurable when you have so much written just in one goal. And so I'd like for you to just kind of share that with others. And how can parents then go back to the team when, if they do use this template, they go back and say, this can't be measurable. We need to change this goal. So what advice can you provide parents to do that?
So first of all, yes, I think it is a really helpful template, and I'll link the PDF for everybody. But I think when I read an IEP goal and I see things like the other day, I just read one where it was the student will do double-digit addition, subtraction, with regrouping and single-digit multiplication, and that was all one goal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, really.
There's a lot going on there.
Yeah, exactly.
And so what I try to do is I try to remind myself as an
Mhm.
advocate and try to help parents think of questions that you can ask that are not going to make the educators feel real defensive and kind of
Mhm.
like this conflict right away. And so if I'm in an IEP meeting, hopefully I've read it ahead of time, but if I haven't and I see something like that, and I just say, so I'm just wondering, when I look at this goal, it looks like there's 3 different math skills.
Mhm.
Which math skill do we think is going to be the hardest for my son to learn?
Right.
And we go to multiplication, and it's like, so would it be okay if we had multiplication as the goal and
Mhm.
we use double digit addition and subtraction as short term objectives? But
Absolutely.
I feel like giving them credit for, like, yeah, these are all the math skills my kid has to learn,
Mhm.
but is there another way we can do it? Even better, I think sometimes, is depending on how many things are written in the goal and how related they are, is to say, can we divide this out into 3 goals?
Yeah.
Mhm.
People are probably going to be less likely to be excited about 3 more goals they have to measure and
Right,
keep
right.
track of. So that's where like that kind of back and forth comes. And then you say, well, let's do them as short-term objectives. They're going to still be working on it. They still have to measure it. But for
Absolutely.
some reason that feels better to the teacher not to have 3 more goals.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's good. So talk to us a little bit about how you might, think about IEP goals, and we'll get to the universal design of it, for learning here in a moment. But how would a parent know what a goal should even be? So
Mhm.
if I'm listening to them talk about these IEP goals, like I'm just going to defer, and to some degree, rightly so, because they're the trained experts. You and I are both educators. But how would a parent who maybe isn't an educator know what should an IEP goal be? Yeah. So how would they know that? How would you encourage parents to dive into that?
Well, hopefully they have friends or a Facebook group or something that they can go to and
Hmm.
learn about some of the things that they have to do as prep,
Hmm.
prepare for the IEP meeting. And then give themselves permission to think of what would they like their child to learn in this next year.
Right.
Mhm.
And not, some parents are going to be really intimidated if we like expect them to walk in with a measurable goal. That's not what I expect parents to do.
Right.
But to think ahead of time, like, if I just take the area of reading, what would
Hmm.
be something I would be so excited about if my child could do this by the end of the year, this kind
Absolutely.
of a reading skill?
Hmm.
And so just globally thinking of some big ideas. And I always want, encourage parents to make sure they think of academic goals.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Even if their child has significant intellectual disabilities, I want to me, reading is a life skill.
It
So
absolutely is.
I
Yeah.
want everybody to have expectations for academics. And then you have to look at the other areas, right? Communication,
Mhm.
things like that.
Sure.
But I think to simplify it, it's just like, what would you love your child to be able to do a year from now?
Absolutely. Good.
I
That's
think
good
it's
advice.
also important. I've heard you mention that depending on your child's grade, is to look at what those curriculum standards are, and
Mhm.
so what it looks like for a sixth grader, and then bring them to the IEP meeting and saying, okay, this is the standards for sixth grade. I don't know if we're, going to be able to reach all of them, but what does this look like for my child to be in that geography classroom or in that social studies classroom?
Mhm.
Right. And that I think is, our kids can really shine in those other classes. And then as they get older, also with electives that they get to
Yeah.
choose. But what I like to do as a parent when Dylan was in middle school was to have just an informal talk with the teachers, right? Everything
Mhm.
doesn't have to be a formal IEP meeting, and just say, what are some of the big ideas, for this, Egypt unit that we want Dylan to learn?
Mhm.
Mhm.
How are we going to know whether or not he learned those things? Because we want kids to be accountable. It's not just nice
Absolutely.
to sit there and soak it up, which they'll do,
Mhm.
but we have expectations for you to learn. Um,
Absolutely.
I have an interesting story when Dylan was in high school and he was
Mhm.
in a sociology class, and the teacher was like, Dylan, we've got a test coming up, but hey, it's cool. You don't need to take it. That's
Ooh,
fine. Well, most high school kids would be like, yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
awesome, right?
Cool.
no test. Well, Dylan came home and it was so interesting. He said to me, Mom, they don't think I'm smart enough.
Oh,
They
wow.
No.
tell me I
Wow.
don't have
What
to
a
take it.
message. What a message.
Yeah.
So here, this unintended consequence, right, of giving them a free pass and not taking the test, actually like
It
deflated
did.
his self-confidence that they don't expect me to learn.
Well, then that just
Right.
sets the standard that, I don't really need to work hard in this class or any class for that
Mhm.
matter.
Mhm.
Maybe you don't
Right.
believe in me and you have no belief in my competence, then you know what? I'm just going to kind of hang out.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
I do
absolutely.
want to just real quickly, someone asked a question, and Mindy from Indiana, short-term objectives, how do they play out in the goals? So if you want to take a couple minutes to address that, Charmaine, that'd be great.
Sure. Hey, Mindy. Um, so what I look at is the goal is the big picture, what we want the child to do a year from now, and then what are the little steps to get to that goal. I'm so dismayed when I read so many IEPs and the goal is to do something by with 80% accuracy, and
Mhm.
then the short-term objective is do this same task with 60% accuracy, and then the next objective is do it with 70% accuracy.
Yeah.
And that doesn't help me as a parent. It doesn't help me as a teacher to really do a task analysis, a breakdown of what skills my child has to do in order to reach that goal.
Right.
Right.
I really like short-term objectives that, if it's double digit addition with regrouping, first, well, we don't know what the baseline is in this example, but,
Right.
if the child can do single digit addition, that might be the first objective, then
Mhm.
double digit addition without regrouping. And then finally, you're going to go into, double digit addition with regrouping. So
Yeah.
just think of it as kind of baby steps to get to
Mhm.
the annual goal.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, math is an easy one to think about because when you had talked about the multiplication goal earlier, students need to be able to put things into groups,
Yeah.
Right.
so that then they can look at those groups
Mhm.
and create the larger number. So if, I have a 7 times 3, I need to either have 3 groups of 7 or 7 groups of 3,
Right.
and they
Right.
need to start seeing that multiplication is groups of,
Yeah.
you know.
Exactly. And
So,
then that kind of then that triggers me, and it's like, oh, so then in accommodations, we want to make sure there's math manipulatives that
Absolutely.
are of interest to my child. So all of it really is connected. And so many times, I think when we write IEPs, it's like this isolated stuff, and it doesn't really gel for the
It
whole
should flow from one part of the IEP to the next.
So I have one more
Absolutely.
question here for you. I'm just going to post all these questions. So Nancy asked, what if the team doesn't take our suggestions for goals that we want and just creates their own?
Well, it's supposed to be a team effort, right? So the ideal for me is if you can get a draft IEP with enough time that you can write questions and jot down comments, send it back to the school so they have time to digest what your comments are, and hopefully go in and edit some of that draft IEP before you get to the meeting. So that's the ideal. That doesn't
I
happen.
know I don't get a draft of my son's IEP. I mean, I've asked for it and it just never happens. So
Really? So
it's worth the ask for sure.
yeah, I would be pretty, the phrase that I would use is meaningful parent participation. That's like one of those key phrases that you can put in an email.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you
but
can even say, in order for me to meaningfully participate, because I don't have the training you do,
Right.
I need extra time. I need an accommodation to be able to digest this information so I can come prepared to talk.
that's a great point. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And what special ed teacher doesn't want to provide an accommodation, right? So absolutely.
Yeah, so I think I'm just like ready to jump into universal design for learning. Are you, Brian?
Yes, let's go.
Okay, so Charmaine, so universal design for learning, UDL, can you talk to our audience about what that actually is? And then how is it different from specially designed instruction?
That's such an excellent question. I love that. So when I think of universal design for learning, I think of classrooms that have engaging learning going on for each and every child. And when I look at universal design for learning, it's coming from more of a general ed standpoint than a special ed.
Right.
It's a framework that helps teachers be able to have a variety of ways that they present information to kids. So not always a lecture, not always a video, but changing things up. That kids have a variety of ways to show what they've learned. So a typical 5-page book report might not be something that your child could do, but a PowerPoint about the book that they read might be something that your child could do.
Absolutely.
And then the third principle, the third part of the framework is that we have engaging, motivated learners in our classroom. And so we have to tap into their interests, their strengths, and build on those in the classroom. Now, it's interesting, Marla, that you ask about the difference between universal design for learning and specially designed instruction, which is what kids have to get in IEPs. Because usually I get the question of what's the difference between universal design for learning and differentiated instruction. So I want to answer yours first. So to me, UDL and specially designed instruction do have similarities, right? They're both, looking at the learner. They're both, trying to, work from point A and get to point B. But specially designed instruction is going to be more individualized. And I don't know, I think of universal design for learning as this proactive way that teachers can meet a whole group of diverse learners at one time. And so I think there is, like I said, some similarities, but just because you're getting specially designed instruction doesn't mean it follows the principles of universal design for learning.
Right.
And so let me give you an example that's kind of quickly going out of my head here. Um, we'll see if I capture it again. With specialized, especially specially designed instruction, some teachers use a curriculum that is very structured about how they present it and how kids respond. Like I remember when I was first teaching, we used this DISTAR reading program. I don't know, Brian, if you've ever heard of it, but
Yep.
very scripted. You know, it tells what the teacher has to say. There's a choral response from the students, then you point to this. So it's all, you know, so that, yeah, it's specially designed instruction, but it's not based anywhere near universal design for learning.
Right. Well, and Charmaine, I like to think of it as, so I think of a highway, and we're all going to get on the highway, but there's different access points to that highway.
Right.
And so with a scripted curriculum like that, it's pretty regimented.
Right.
It's there's not a lot of room for teacher interpretation, you know, and so there's not a lot of access points. The access point is what I say. And so it is very specially designed instruction, but it is not universal design for learning because there's not a lot of access points for kids to be able to get on that highway.
Right.
So that's a great example.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit then about the differentiated instruction? Because there are so many different, you know, metaphors or whatever you want to say. But I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I think it's important for our parents to understand the difference between all this.
Right. And that brings up a point that you can always put parent training in the IEP so parents can get some information about things like this.
Yeah.
Universal design for learning is proactive. So you're doing that when you're planning your lessons and you're thinking of the multitude of diverse learners that you could possibly have. And you want to make sure that when you're planning your lesson ahead of time, that you've considered those things and you've, brought in some, whatever designs to make sure that all kids are going to be accessing the curriculum. Differentiated instruction usually is more of a retroactive kind of fit where it's like, this is my lesson I do every year about, animals that live on the seashore. And, oh yeah, I forgot. Shoot, I got that one kid in my class, he really can't, what am I going to do? He really can't read this book. I need to enlarge the font. So it's kind of thinking of more individual kids and maybe not being as proactive. And you kind of go, oh yeah, I should have thought about this ahead of time.
Right.
But again, there's overlap with universal design for learning and differentiated instruction because differentiated instruction talks about, varying your content, your process, things like that. So basically, I think what parents want to know is this going to be engaging for my child to do?
Yeah.
Are we going to have choices about how he shows you what he learned? And these are ways my child learns best. Can we make sure that throughout the day he gets teachers that are using these strategies? And the label doesn't matter as much as, is your kid going to be interested? Are they going to be learning?
Yeah.
So then are IEP goals then written specifically with the special instruction or the special design instruction in mind? I mean, are they written with that mindset?
Well, and it can be, and I've been actually thinking I could update my IEP goal template a bit because I just always keep kind of evolving with how I see things. But one of the things that you can do, and I'm going to be actually talking about that later today on my show, but is embedding inclusion into the IEP goals.
I saw that. I love that.
Yeah.
And also embedding it in the needs, embedding inclusion in the disability impact statement. So I'm going to be talking about places we don't usually think about where we can embed inclusion in the IEP. And then we build our case at the end of the meeting, we have a stronger case to say the least restrictive environment is the general ed classroom.
Right.
But I think I got down a rabbit hole and I didn't really answer your question. What was your question?
Well, with regards to like the IEP goals, you know, I mean, are they written, or should they be written, I should say, with that special design instruction in mind?
It depends because most likely districts are not going to want to say we're going to use the Wilson reading program.
Right.
And they're not going to want a goal that says, the student will, learn these phonemic awareness skills through the Wilson program. Because they always come back to, what if we don't have the Wilson program? What if we, lose our contract with them or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
But what you can do instead is use adjectives to describe that specially designed instruction. And so you can say, given multisensory, systematic structured reading. So you define it, given this, my child, will do whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a way that you can embed some things into the goals.
That's interesting. Good information. Yeah.
So you can do some of that, like thinking of what the program provides. It provides multisensory instruction, or it provides, different access points. So given that information, I think that's really good to incorporate that, because a lot of districts will balk at the putting a specific program in, and that makes sense because they may lose that program. So
Right.
So how do children benefit from universal design for learning, and what would a parent do if they don't feel their child is doing this at their school, or even if they're even interested in adopting that type of teaching and learning?
Well, what's so exciting about universal design for learning is that all kids benefit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just the child that's on an IEP or 504. It's also for the child that English is their second language.
Right.
It's for the child that,
Absolutely.
didn't have breakfast or dinner. And, so it looks like at all the variability that we have in our society. And we look at ways to support each and every child. So all the kids benefit so much. And the other thing that's interesting is the teachers benefit.
Yeah.
It makes you a better teacher.
Yeah, it does.
I remember when I was a second grade teacher and I had a little girl that had a hearing impairment, and she used an FM system. And so I had this microphone and we had the whole thing set up and it was working well. And then we were going to watch a Reading Rainbow video. And I thought, oh, maybe I should put the microphone by the TV so she can hear it better. And then I'm like, ooh, maybe I can figure out how to bring up closed captions.
Yeah.
And guess what? Closed captions helped all my second graders that day watch that video. And if Brianna hadn't been in my class, I would have never thought of that.
Right.
So it helps you become a better teacher, plus benefits all the kids.
Absolutely.
As far as parents wanting to see if this can be something implemented in their building or in their district, having a conversation with a teacher or two, talking to the principal, seeing, what level of interest there is. I often get parents asking me, well, what article can I send in that talks about universal design for learning so the teachers know about it? Well, just like we want to have our kids have a variety of ways of learning things, we got to think about teachers have a variety of ways they like to learn. So before you just start emailing in all these articles, ask, would you love to, have a podcast?
Right.
Shelley Moore's or Julie Costin's podcast. Would you like to watch a short video on this? Go to cast.org. You can see a video.
Yeah.
And so you want to have a variety of ways to help teachers be introduced to this, because a lot of teachers, even though it's been around since the 1990s, might not have heard about it, and they might need just some beginning information. And then my other soapbox is if you do staff development on it, invite parents and have follow-up coaching, because just going to one workshop isn't going to implement it in the classroom. So that follow-up coaching is always
Yeah. So if a school or a district or maybe even a teacher is interested in following that up, where can they look? I mean, like you said, workshops, things like that, but but where might they start that search if that is something they were interested in?
Well, the CAST website, CAST, and I can put the link for that. It's castprofessionallearning.org.
Uh-huh.
That's like kind of like the premium gold standard.
Yeah, CAST is a great resource.
Universal Design for Learning. And they have really, short videos that explain the concept and make it easy for both parents and teachers to understand. And then for teachers that want to dive in, there's like a lesson plan bank that you can look at. There's templates that you can develop your own lesson plans in. There's all kinds of tools there. The other really good resource is the IRIS Center,
Yep.
IRIS, IRIS. And that's at, I think
That's
it's
at Vanderbilt.
Yeah, iris.peabody.vanderbilt at Vanderbilt.
Something like that. They could probably Google Iris and Vanderbilt or
that
something.
one I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's really good because it breaks down it's like an online learning course for lots of different topics. And UDL is one of the topics that they have an online course for.
Awesome. Those are great resources. Thank you.
My school does. I asked about UDL, and they said we use universal based design. I know. I think it's archaic. So I was like, I don't even know what that means. So, I think, and that's where I think it's like, I think you probably should ask, like, what your school uses, like what is their format for creating this curriculum? Because I was kind of surprised. I was like, I even had to Google that. I'm like, I don't even know what that means. But
right.
I think it was something to the effect of like, here's where we want them to be at, and then how do we design the curriculum to be at that that goal or whatever.
Right.
But it's not, because I know we had a situation where I was observing, and one of the teachers just like pushed the button and like the audio came on, right? My son had nothing to do with it. And I'm looking at everybody like he's not even paying attention, because that's not the way he learns.
Right.
And those are things that that has to be brought up with the teachers. Like, if your child does not learn like that, which I think a lot of our kids are really visual learners. I'm a visual learner.
Right.
You really need to keep re-emphasizing that, because and then the other thing, the other kids had the book in front of them, so they were literally listening and following along, and my son had nothing. It's like
Well, and if you think about it, that's not meaningful inclusion, because if there's not an access point to the curriculum for that child, and they're sitting around twiddling their thumbs, just because they're physically present in the room doesn't mean they're included.
Right. Right. So I think it's a great, universal design for learning, like you said, Charmaine, it's for everybody. It's for everything. You don't have to be on an IEP to know that, hey, you know what, this lesson, it's not clicking with me. Maybe there's a different way we can approach this lesson. Or, and I kind of wish that teachers would check in with their students before they throw a test at them, and realize, for the last 3 weeks, you've been going over this curriculum, and that student has not been able to retain any of that information because you weren't able to capture them through the way that they know how to learn, or the way that they understood that. And it's sad because, they just go on. Okay, well, sorry, you got that. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry about this.
It's real life. It's a live show. It's real life.
I know. My dog came in, but then he left, so I was happy.
Well, I'm at work, so I don't have any dogs here.
So, it's such a great topic, and I just want to encourage anybody that, if you are listening and you have questions for Charmaine, pop them in our chat, and I can, post them up. But the other thing is, like, what should parents look for, at their child's school or in their child's classroom with regards to UDL? What is it that they're looking for? Is it just the way the teacher is presenting, or is there other things that they can say, hey, teacher, are you using this? And then know that UDL is being utilized in that classroom.
So I think, your idea of going to observe is excellent. That's the best way for parents to get a feel for what's going on at school.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can spend, I think probably at least a half an hour in your child's classroom,
Yeah.
looking and just being that kind of fly on the wall or at the back of the room, and seeing what students are doing. Is everybody sitting down at their desk with the same worksheet? Is everybody looking at the teacher as she's lecturing, and within that 30 minutes you don't see any other kind of instructional strategies being used? Is she going to break it up to small group discussion? Is she going to have some kids get up and explain how they figured out the answer? So I look for variety, and I also simple things like looking in the classroom and seeing what student work is up.
Yeah.
What kind of, is it 29 different colored worksheets of Abraham Lincoln because President's Day is
Is this
coming?
President's Day?
And are kids allowed, to get up and move? Are they, allowed to sit in different kinds of clusters for different, activities? How regimented it is, how flexible it is. I think that's kind of visually, you can get a real good idea just that way.
Yeah.
Yes, I
Absolutely.
do think it is important that, parents make it a point to get into the classroom just to observe. And that's just an easy request. I mean, there's probably a form that needs to be filled out, but I would strongly encourage parents that if something doesn't feel right or you have any questions, that you reach out to, whoever is in team chair to say, I need to get into the classroom, because that's really the only way you're going to get a good feel of what's truly going on.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Charmaine, we are kind of at the end of our show here. Thank you so much for joining us today. Is there anything else that you can think of that we need to know, or that we can give advice to parents as far as advocating for their child, looking at goals, talking about universal design for learning? Anything else you want to share with those who are watching and those who may watch on the replay?
Well, my whole idea when I created the Facebook group, Universal Design for Inclusion,
Mm-hmm.
was that sometimes I think teachers, when they hear the I word, they just like, it's like a wall gets built right away.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we can maybe talk less about inclusion, talk more about universal design for learning, because that, if we have teachers doing universal design for learning, we're going to have inclusion.
Absolutely.
And so I just hope that parents look at this as a way that we can make sure all of our students in our buildings are interested, motivated, learning with their classmates every day.
Absolutely.
I
Well,
have
I know as a
I wanted to just ask this, or not me, but just post.
Hey, Marla.
Yeah.
Hold on a second. I wanted to add on to
Okay,
what
go ahead,
Charmaine said real quick. Sorry. I know as a principal, I used to be an elementary school principal and early childhood special education principal. When I would go into a classroom and see the kids engaged and see them all learning, I knew that there was something really good going on in that classroom. If I went in and saw them all doing the same color sheet, following the directions that Abraham Lincoln's hat must be black, and then it must, or whatever, I knew there wasn't access points for kids. And so I think even from an administrative standpoint, that idea of universal design for learning is so important for all children to be meaningfully engaged in the work of the curriculum. So I appreciate that very much. Yeah.
Yeah, no, good point, Brian. So Nancy actually posted a question here. UDL works, like question, or should we request training for them? Is that something that you could put in the IEP? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you could dictate, what training this school is actually supposed to be doing.
I know. You can request training for staff, and that goes under the supplemental aids and services part of the IEP, because it's not only services and support for your child, but also the people that work with your child. So a lot of times parents don't realize that you can talk about staff training in the IEP. And when you do, and if it's written in the IEP for the staff to get training on universal design for learning, then I really want it to be even more specific, because I don't want it to be at a staff meeting. They talk about UDL for 15 minutes and they consider that their training. So there's a whole other kind of aspect to being specific about it. But yeah, you can ask for that. And then, like I said, I've always been a proponent of schools opening up professional development and inviting parents to come if it fits their schedule. Because we want parents and teachers hearing the same message at the same time, being able to ask questions. So you can also put parent training in the IEP too.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Hey, I have a question from a viewer as well. It's from Sarah, and it was a little confusing, so I asked her to clear it up. So we're gonna try to do that here. So she says, at the moment, if we pursue an academic focus for her child, the district has tiered classes. So those tiered classes might be a SPED setting, a co-taught setting, gen ed setting with no teaching support, maybe a para, and honors and gifted. Okay. And she says she's looking to schedule classes for next school year, and the opportunity to have access to grade level curriculum will almost certainly be suggested by the school to be in the basic class, which she says is the SPED setting. But in special, let's see, which is grade level curriculum focused class, but in a specialized setting, and that inherently limits access to non-disabled peers. She said there are some co-taught classes which will have a mix of students. So she's just wondering, how ideas about how to get the high school to think differently about that so that kids have access. Sarah, I hope that's making sense, or I hope I'm communicating that right. Does that kind of make sense, Charmaine, what she's kind of asking?
Yes, yes. And did you say this was high school?
It is high school, yes.
Yeah, and I think I see this common thread in secondary schools where it's like they'll have this, biology, I don't know how they say it, like biology, not 101, but something. And it means, oh, that's the special ed biology class. And they'll say, well, we're getting your child access to the general ed curriculum, but it's all with, other kids
with IEPs, right?
IEPs. So, Sarah, if you want to come to Visions and Voices together on my Facebook page today at noon, Mountain Time, because we're going to be talking about how you build inclusion throughout the IEP. So you need to make your case that you want your child getting access to general ed curriculum in the general ed classrooms at the very beginning. When you talk about your child's strengths, when you talk about his needs to be around peers that he can model from, that goes into your goals. And you say he's going to learn this in the biology classroom in the high school. And, so there's all these steps to take. So at the end of the IEP, it's a lot easier to say the general ed classroom, because we already said he needed that in the needs section. We already said that in the goal. And, but yeah, it's, your child's disability should not be, sometimes they rank kids, right? It's like, oh, you have more significant cognitive disabilities. You've got to be in this tier. And it's like, no, that's a placement decision that the team needs to talk about.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's good. Yeah. I responded back to her to check out your video today at noon Mountain Time.
Yeah, we will post that below, in the comments, because I want to be a part of that as well. So we'll make sure that everybody has that link. So, is there any other questions we had, Brian?
I think that's it. Yeah. So, Charmaine, thank you so much for being here. I know it's valuable to me, and I'm sure as Marla as well. And I know our viewers will be blessed by your words of wisdom. And I would really encourage you to check out Charmaine's show today at noon Mountain Time, 1 Central, 2 Eastern. I hope I'm getting all those right. So check that out. I am actually in a classroom observing at that time, so I won't be able to watch it, but we can check you out on a replay as well too, right?
Right. Yes.
All right. Very good. So make sure to check that out. I'm sure it'll be great information. And it's more about how to write inclusion, if you will, into the goals so that the natural conclusion is that those goals are met in a general ed setting.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to that.
So.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you again, Charmaine. This was amazing and great information. And I know that we're going to have some more questions along the way. So I just hope that you can stop back in and, again, share that IEP goal template that we talked about at the beginning. Because, I think that was such a great visual for me to kind of just be able to look to make sure that IEP goal is actually written so that it is measurable. And then make sure you just add your your Facebook pages and stuff like that, just because I know people want to stay in touch with you. So.
But thank you. This was fun to meet you guys, and we'll have to meet in person sometime.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That'd be great. That'd be great. All right. Thank you so much, Charmaine.
Charmaine. Have a good day.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, Marla, we have another show coming up next month.
Yes, we do. And it's with my friend. It's actually March 12th. So let me give you that.
Yes.
Date. March 12th. It's with Paula Collins. She is an assistant vice president for employment services at Work Inc. And she is going to be talking to us about how we can help our children transition into that employment stage of their life and what to look for. So even though Jacob's only 14, well, not yet, he's 13.
But it's coming up soon, Marla. It's happening.
That is right there.
Fast. It's happening too fast.
So I'm excited to hear what she has to say. And so again, that's March 12th, 12 p.m. EST, 11 a.m. CST.
Yep.
And I don't go past that.
Well, and I'm excited about that because I know, we probably all know people, families who have those almost adult children who are going to be transitioning into that world. And that'll be really important. And I know it'll be really important for you as you start to think about transition for Jacob. And we're not quite there yet for Nate, but in a couple of years, we'll be having those conversations as well. And so that'll be good information for us to think about. Yeah, very, very much so. So again, everyone, thank you again for being here. If you do have questions, please make sure you keep popping them up into the in the thread, and either myself, Brian, or Charmaine will get back to you. I know there was some information. She mentioned CAST, and I do think that I put that URL, but I'll just go back and check that, make sure it's the right URL. And I think she mentioned Iris. I don't really know. So we'll look that one up and we'll put that in the thread. So again, thank you everyone for being here. It was a great show today. A lot of information, a lot of things to start thinking about, especially since we're probably right in the big crux of IEP season. So I know so start taking the information that you're learning on these talk shows and write them down and use them when you go to your IEP meetings. Because like you said, Ryan, they're equal members of the IEP team meeting. They are. Get discouraged or think you can't ask questions or make suggestions because you are a part of that and team. They need to be meaningful members of that team. Absolutely. And if you're watching this or either now or on the replay, if you have ideas that you want to hear about, that you want us to talk about, please make sure you share those with us. Either Marla and I can talk about those, or we can find someone who can come on and do that as well. So we're happy to address those needs as well. So we're excited to be partnering with all of you out there in the world that's watching the show, and we want to be a resource for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
well, thank you again, everyone. Have a great day, and we'll see you March 12th.
March 12th. All right.
Take care.
Marla.
Bye-bye.